Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the December 6th, 2022 regular meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. I'll call to order at 7:01 p.m. May we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Kuznick,
I'm here.
Commissioner Marks,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Edwards,
Here.
Chair Alpert.
And here, if you'd all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, recording secretary, do we have any late communication speaker cards or speakers in the Zoom audience?
One late communication item received from Ariel Strauss from Greenfire Law are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting. And I did not receive any speaker cards for this item, but we
Okay,
do no hands raised.
and we have no hands raised. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public comment. Nobody's running up the last minute. Okay, item 5, additions and revisions. There are none. Item 6, the consent calendar. There are none. Item 7, approval of the minutes from the November 15, 2022 regular planning commission meeting. Everyone had a chance to look at them. Changes, corrections.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval.
Okay, why don't we wait for the little green button to show up? Okay, great. Moved by Commissioner Marks. Can we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. Seconded by Commissioner Edwards. Okay, the motion passes 5-0-0 for the minutes. Okay, item 8, continued items after the close of the public hearing. There are none. And item 9 is a continued item, the public hearing on 9.1 TrueMark Townhomes, the 2481 Deerwood Drive project. And before we begin, Commissioner Edwards has an announcement.
Thank you, Commissioner Alpert. I will be recusing myself from this matter based on my office's relationship with TrueMark Homes.
Okay, we are going to have a short staff report from Division Manager Lauren Barr. However, he's on Zoom today,
He's on
right?
Zoom tonight, so I'll be
Okay.
operating the PowerPoint slides.
Great.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to come to you remote today. As you mentioned, I have a short PowerPoint presentation, and after which I'll be available for questions as well as the applicant. Next slide, please. So the project location is 2481 Deerwood, approximately 4.43 acres. General plan designation is currently office, and zoning is office administration. Next slide. So here's a aerial view of the property. As you can see, there are apartments to the west, residential neighborhoods to the north and east, and then the lower portion of the site is wooded. It slopes down to Crow Canyon Road. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed parcel configuration. It's approximately, as I mentioned, 4 acres total, but what we have is it's split into 2 lots. And the first lot, or the lower lot, is the open space lot, which is approximately 1.66 acres. And the upper portion of the lot where the residential development is proposed is approximately 2.77 acres. The general plan, proposed general plan amendment that goes along with this project would change the designation from office to multifamily high-density residential, 14 to 30 units per acre. And then, as I mentioned, the lower portion is open space. Next slide. Zoning revision, rezone, would take it from administrative office to high-density residential, 22 to 30 units per acre, as well as open space too for the lower portion. And so those would be consistent between general plan and zoning. Next slide. So just a recap of the project real quickly, the project would demolish the 51,000 square foot office building that exists on site. There's 61 townhomes being proposed, 3 stories, 35 feet maximum height. These are alley loaded 2-car garages for each unit. It's a private loop road and alley. And then there are 15 guest spaces on site. In addition, there's a tot lot play area that was presented, as well as a scenic overlook at the lower portion of the site and circulation throughout. Next slide. So just in terms of a little bit of project history, the project went to the Architectural Review Board on May 12th, as well as August 11th. There was a recommendation for Planning Commission final review of the architecture as revised. That was presented at the last meeting. There were 2 prior Planning Commission meetings on both the project and the general plan and rezone, and tonight's the 3rd hearing required by Measure G. Next slide. There was a mitigated negative declaration prepared to address the California Environmental Quality Act. That was posted from October 27th through November 28th of this year. We received 2 comments, one related to, from East Bay Mud, related to pipe size, water service requirements, and water conservation requirements. And then additionally, we received a request from California Fish and Wildlife for a requirement for a standard agreement associated with watershed maintenance activities for the project. Next slide. At the prior meeting on November 1st, there were a few comments that were provided by the commission that were addressed in the staff report. One was a desire for some sort of monument sign. The applicant is working on designs for that, and that's something that will come back when the commission looks at the development level approvals. Tonight, we're only looking at a recommendation on the legislative acts, the general plan amendment and rezone and mitigated negative declaration. In addition, not done yet. In addition, there were some comments related to traffic concerns. There was a response provided by the city traffic engineer that was in the staff report. And the general consensus is that the roadway is consistent with city standards. In addition, there was a discussion related to wildfire risk. The graphics shown on the slide here is part of the application package that shows the management plan for a 30-foot and 100-foot buffer associated with the lower portions of the site. We also prepared some draft conditions in the staff report that would be forwarded along with the project approvals related to submittal of the plans to the fire district. Then also the HOA considered participation in a fuel management program such as Firewise USA. Again, that's something that would be looked at as part of the final project review. Next slide. So the recommendation tonight is to receive the staff report, take public comments on the mitigated negative declaration, as well as the project itself. And then if appropriate, adopt resolution 1122 recommending city council approval of the general plan amendment, rezone, and mitigated negative declaration. I just wanted to note that once again, the legislative acts move on to city council. The project level approvals will come back to planning commission once the general plan amendment and rezone have been resolved. So with that, I'm available for questions. I know the applicant is available for questions as well. So I'll turn it back to the commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. So I think Does the applicant wish to speak before we have any questions?
Hi again, Garrett Hines with TrueMark Homes, Vice President. I just wanted to say that we have read all of the staff conditions of approval and we've agreed to those. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll take questions from the commission before we open public comment. If you have any questions for tonight, Commissioner Kuznick.
I do have a question. And thank you, Lauren. You can hear my question. I'm a little concerned, having read through the steps and first of all, I'm pleased to see that there is a wildfire risk management plan. I guess the question that I have is, when they implement the requirements listed in the graphic that in our report, it was bigger print, about pruning the underbrush, pruning up a certain height and so forth, and all those steps, which I applaud. Will this become in conflict with what is in the CEQA for protecting the creek habitat at any time? It seems like as we mitigate for one, we might be impacting a different area in the CEQA report. So I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very good comment. Oftentimes there are conflicting aspects of regulatory environment. And I think that was the portion, really the point of the Fish and Wildlife request for the standard agreement permit, because it's upstream from or uphill from the stream. And so that way they have the opportunity to assess those management practices and make sure they're not in conflict with those particular policies. And there are most certainly safe ways to do fuel management without running afoul of the environmental requirements. It's just, it may take a little extra caution.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Commissioner Wallace?
Mr. Barr, could you turn to the slide marked general plan amendment, and maybe Ms. Chamberlain could pop that up on the screen too? Just let me know when you're ready to rock and roll. Yep, there you go. Do you have it in front of you, Lauren?
I can see what you're seeing.
Oh, okay. On both of the plots of the property beneath, on the right-hand side, what's marked as OS in green open space, there's a strip marked OS-1, and below that there are what appears to be a photograph of some treetops.
Correct.
What are those bottom two sections of the diagram?
Well, the basically you're up against the public right of way. So the creek area itself is in public right of way. And so that's city property for city management. And so that's where you're dealing with right of way and city owned property. So we're the immediate neighbor. There are drainage easements that come off the property to the creek. And so those are part of the mapping exercise and ongoing maintenance responsibilities.
Is that where the treetop picture is?
Correct. That's actually public right of way associated with, I guess, technically the roadway, but it's really the creek.
Okay, and OS-1 represents what?
It's a buffer zone that's between it, but it's an open space zone. I do believe it's also owned by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, want to go ahead and open public comment at this time. Did we receive any late communications?
One late communication item was received from Robert Klingner and is part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting.
Okay, great. So at this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on this agenda. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a green speaker card at the back of the room. Or if you wish to speak remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to speak. Do we have any cards turned in?
Yes, we have a speaker card received from Robert Klingner.
Okay. Come on down, Robert. Oh, there you go.
Good evening. My name is Robert Klinger. I did send over the comments, and I think that the members of the commission probably received that today. My wife always reminds me before I leave tonight make sure that I give you guys a lot of hell. She says, give them hell tonight. So that's the instructions I have. My basic concern, and it goes back till 2005, 2006, and all the interim meetings that we've had that affect the Deerwood area. It has to do with safety. So I've spoken quite often to both the Planning Commission, the city council, and the mayors subsequently. The bottom line basic concern is that Deerwood Drive is unsafe as it is today. And I think I did a little history that you folks read of where we started and where we're at now. It's for people on the commission, from the perspective of the residents, there's a little bit of a disconnect because I see it all the time because people are fearful. And it's not made up stuff, and it's not political stuff. It's like people have a genuine fear because they understand sort of intuitively the dangers that's provided at that intersection, Claremont Crest Court, Claremont Crest Way, and Deerwood. So in a sense, I wrote the comments to throw this back at the Planning Commission and also the City Council. If folks, I haven't made the appointments, but I'll probably go tell or discuss this with the City Council starting next week and the mayor. And it's related to this project because the right outside the project is that intersection, and you have people that will be living there, and it impacts them if they're not able to get across the street or enter Deerwood Drive safely. That's not a good thing. So I look at you folks in the City Council as the people that have to deal with this issue and have to correct the problem. So far, as I kind of inferred in my comments, 20 years now, we haven't taken a step. I could tell another story. Do I have a few minutes left? No. Okay, I'll leave that story for next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have any other speaker cards at this time? No, no speaker cards. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. Open this up for discussion among the commission. Again, as a reminder from Lauren, we are not approving the project tonight. We're looking at the general plan amendment with a recommendation ultimately to the City Council, and also the MND, the mitigated negative declaration. And the project will come back. And Robert, we all did receive the comments that you sent over, as did city staff. So, by the time we get to the project, they will have time to digest your comments as well. Questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none, then maybe we have. Good.
I'm sitting right next to you here, pal. I actually only have two comments, one of which is a request. In the staff report on packet page 13, under agency district service letters, I was the commissioner that asked for the will serve letters at the last meeting. And I take Lauren's point that there's a bit more to will an agency, an outside agency, serve the city. But I, for one, find it very helpful to see the comments that the agency makes. In a way, it helps me to kind of track them a little bit, see a little bit of what they are willing to show. I don't have any direct contact with some of the agencies that serve the cities, but I would request that in the future that we continue to get those letters, and as early as possible. There are circumstances where it could affect site planning. It's not likely that the staff and the applicant haven't already worked out some of those things, but nonetheless, I would appreciate it. The other comment that I have is really a plea. I would like the city to buy me a very powerful magnifying glass. There is a plan legend on packet page 14 that is so small that my 2 times magnifying glass really wasn't all that helpful. And so either please attach something like that as a full-sized attachment, or a tenfold increase, magnifying glass would be very much appreciated. Otherwise, I have no other comments and am quite ready to move the resolution as soon as you think it's appropriate.
Thank you. My scratchy magnifying glass didn't work well either, so. Other comments? No. Okay, well, it looks like we are ready to move to the resolution. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at packet page 22, which is the resolution. And we can go page by page before we, make a motion to adopt the resolution. So turning to page 1 of 8, any questions or corrections? Seeing none. Okay, page 2, which is all of the whereases. I did not see anything on this page. Page 3 is the resolution.
I have a comment. Under Arabic number 2 starts out the subject site. While I believe that occasionally people get hosed, I think the thrust of this was a housing opportunity site. So with that amendment.
Okay,
Yeah, I got my red pen out also. It's
Okay.
going to say.
okay. Anything else on page 3? No. Okay, page 4 is the signature page and list of exhibits. And then exhibit B is the ordinance that will be signed by the city council at some point. Anybody see anything there? Okay, exhibit B1 is the proposed rezone map. And that concludes. And then page 8 is the MND. Okay, seeing no other changes, could we have a motion to adopt resolution 1122 as amended?
I so move, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, I'll read the title into the record. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon recommending City Council approval of a general plan amendment, GPA 2022-0002 for the property located at 2481 Deerwood Drive, assessors parcel number 208-640-003, from office to multiple family, high density residential and open space, rezoning of the property RZ 2022-0002 from administrative office OA to high density residential RH open space 2 OS2, and recommending adoption of an initial study mitigated negative declaration environmental 2022-002 for the proposed project.
I will happily second that.
I think because Commissioner Edwards is out, it's not showing up just yet, so she will be abstained. Okay, there we go. So the resolution did pass 4001. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay. As Commissioner Edwards is rejoining, if the next applicant, if you wanted to start getting set up, we can go ahead and do that.
Sorry. Oh, we have to go.
So item 10 is a public hearing, new items. We do not have any tonight, and the non-public hearing action items, we have none, but we are now moving into a study session. And the study session is on proposed to gather input on the Chevron Park property. And as Sunset is getting ready to go, we will take a pause here for a second. Okay, are you
evening.
ready?
Good evening, Chair, members of the commission. Tonight, we have a presentation by Sunset Development on their vision for the Chevron Park parcel. And so they'll be walking through their overall vision. We'll solicit comments from the commissioners this evening and from the general public. And also to the commissioners I know who love to doodle and draw and play with site plans. We'll be happy to receive any ideas you have after the meeting tonight, and we'll forward those over to the applicant for when they come back, they can have some further input. And with that, I'll introduce Alex Marin Jr.
Thank you, Chair Alpert, members of the Planning Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight to jointly discuss the future of the city that we all love and care about so much. I agree with the sentiments that I often hear that the process whereby developers are required to develop quite detailed plans before presenting to you eliminates valuable opportunities for the creation and implementation of shared ideas. And I hope this session is a good first step in remedying that as we progress into what will be a very important chapter for San Ramon. I know you designed tonight's session to be a discussion, and me presenting runs counter to that. We have tried to assemble a concise overview of the three main product types we're discussing: office, retail, and housing, and our feelings about where those uses stand and what their future role is in Bishop Branch. I appreciate your allowing me to present that prior to digging into the discussion about the specifics of the DMU South area and the downtown core. As always, thank you for your commitment to the city and your hard work from the macro to the micro as our city is planned out. Our company and our family are in great debt to everyone who has committed great parts of their lives to the progression of San Ramon, past, present, and future. And as such, we approach these matters with a great deal of humility and respect. Tonight, we're here to talk about the future. Our hope is that we can convey our feelings about the what and the why tonight. What we think is the right planning for the area that's quickly emerging as the downtown core of San Ramon within Bishop Branch, and why we feel that now is the time to implement the planning required to put it into motion. Bishop Branch will forever be a work in progress. We are not an investment builder doing projects where we see opportunity and selling for maximum profit. Bishop Branch is our opportunity. And 100% of our resources, our hearts, and our souls are committed to its long-term success. While recent years have brought many changes, the vision you're hearing tonight is nothing new. For 2 decades, Bishop Branch has been morphing into something very different than it was in the 1980s and 1990s. The pandemic only opened individual and corporate eyes to what could be possible to allow for more efficiency for the corporation and more happiness for the individual. Dilbert was a good indicator of people's love of the office, and that was created right here in San Ramon in the 1980s. Thankfully, the acceleration of changes brought by the pandemic are very exciting for San Ramon because it's just the type of place people realize they want to be, and it's getting better every single day. This can't be said for many other places that were very popular just a few short years ago. I'd like to share quickly what I feel the essence of San Ramon is, past, present, and future. In the present, I would say San Ramon embodies our forever values: family-friendly, diverse, safe, beautiful, well-planned with great open space, and managed to a world-class standard. In the past, San Ramon was an assemblage of great subdivisions. It had one of the world's best business parks, and it attracted well-capitalized families who sought the quality and value that it offered. It lacked a clear identity. For the future, we believe the partition nature of San Ramon's past will be eroded, and what was a business park will become its downtown, uniting all of its amazing neighborhoods at the gateway to the city at Interstate 680, retaining its forever identity with great parks, safety, and beautiful planning, design, and open space, but adding additional great public places like City Center and new parks where its citizens can gather and remove to the barriers to socialization that suburbia creates. And most importantly, adding diverse housing types that will attract individuals and families who previously have been uninterested in the housing that we offer. We get excited about discussing public places, retail, attracting new businesses to San Ramon. But the addition of these new typologies of housing to our city is what will fuel the type of walkable presence that is absolutely necessary to create the downtown that we're all dreaming about. We are excited about this future. We are poised to execute the vision in tandem with you, and we couldn't think of a different place or group of people we'd prefer to be working with. I'd like to speak for a moment about what we see going on in the office market. We are, of course, in the midst of one of the most dramatic shifts in human history, and San Ramon is at the heart of that story. One of the most livable cities in a region that houses the nation's highest growth economy, and one that is technology focused and thus much more apt to adopt hybrid work. We do not shy from this reality. We must embrace it and continue to make our city one of the best places to grow a business. I said before that we're not reacting to a two-year trend with this vision. It's been the same one that we presented for a decade, and it's been a reaction to watching 20 years of changes in office uses. In the 1980s and 90s, we leased office space at a density of 400 square feet per person. In the 2000s and 2010s, we've been leasing office space at 150 to 200 square feet per person, doubling the capacity of Bishop Branch from a jobs perspective. This change was enabled by many things: furniture changes, less private offices, moving file cabinets to the cloud. But more importantly, it was enabled by a shift in employee type in Bishop Branch. Technology allowed San Francisco-based companies to move back office jobs further afield, out of state, where employees could live a better life than they could afford working out of Bishop Branch. Our jobs went up the pay scale, and knowledge work took the place of back office work. That came along with much more travel, hybrid flexibility, and a much lower daily attendance rate per person. For example, one of our largest tenants, Robert Half, worked 2 days remote, 3 days in the office before the pandemic. In addition, we've become a much more locally serving office destination as well. Bishop Branch was once a value play for companies. Today, it's a talent play. The onset of the pandemic has accelerated this, as you know. Now that 175 to 200 square feet per person will be coupled with a 1:3 or 1:4 usage ratio for each assigned seat, making the usage of space closer to 50 square feet per person assigned, since a given employee will only come to the office 1 to 3 days a week. Now, we all know that the pendulum has swung too far, and that the desires of 20-something new workers to never have to brave the toxic office environment will leave them untrained to deal with the real world of business, where you may from time to time have to actually interact with another human being. That said, the business of attracting today's Bay Area companies to San Ramon will not revert. Huge full building leases will become far fewer, and top companies will locate here in smaller formats, looking for the adjacent housing, amenities, and talent. We believe we have a good story to tell in this environment, and that's a great thing, because we've had nearly 1 million feet of vacant office space for over 10 years. And we have scores of spaces that companies have shuttered and intend to vacate at the end of their leases. This space is not productive for creating the city that we all want to have. The story is one of San Ramon being the perfect place for the live-work lifestyle, where everything one needs is within close proximity and where a growing population of Bay Area residents find comfort and value on many fronts. We want to be that place that companies see as the perfect regional location to provide an office that employees want to be at. These changes have accelerated some realities we must face at Bishop Branch. Our older buildings from the 1980s are not going to lease in the San Ramon office market of the future. These businesses that have decided to grow in California want top quality buildings with great amenities, a walkable environment, and diverse housing options. Buildings like BR6 and the original Chevron Park buildings did not age well. On the other hand, buildings like BR1 and 2600 have. We need to and are investing in those campuses heavily to attract these new companies. And the other campuses need to quickly pivot to meet the adjacency requirements of today's tenants. If we are able to implement these plan changes and attract today's growing California companies, our job space will continue to surpass all-time highs as densities increase. These workers will live here. They will love working in smaller offices. They will spend money and create sales tax in our retail, and many will love to live and work on-site in this new environment. Again, these moves have been afoot for decades, and they've made office leasing a struggle. What we've seen many times are companies like AT&T or Bank of the West lease many hundreds of thousands of feet, only to turn around in subsequent years and vacate for out-of-state locations. With your help, we've been making many steps towards becoming this new type of suburban downtown, shaking our identity as a large corporate campus and building a new one as a great place. We've been seeing some of these new companies make the choice to locate in San Ramon. 2600 has become our most prized asset with a great market, walking trails, and a productive conference center. The build-out of the core area with the City Walk entitlement is well underway. The City Hall is complete and in the perfect location. City Center has become a success. In 2024, Summerhill will begin to welcome our first residents in Bishop Branch into new walkable homes of the type we feel we need more of. And we were able to retain Chevron's world headquarters in San Ramon through an innovative transaction this year. These are some images of experiences we've been able to deliver so far and what we want to see some more of. Retail is the most difficult land use for a planner to solve for. Cities want great places for their citizens to gather and socialize. Scale, location, and access are critical. They must have abundant parking, but that parking cannot dominate the feeling of the place, which means it comes at a great cost in a structure. We feel City Center succeeded on these counts, and creating extensions of it on adjacent properties is central to our vision. They should be complementary, but distinct from the Renzo Piano designed building in their look, feel, and tenants. They should serve the same purpose of creating community gathering areas and fill our need for more neighborhood retail, serving daily and weekly needs in a place that isn't dominated by surface parking. It is our conclusion that the city has three key issues when it comes to retail. We want more quality places for our citizens to gather and enjoy themselves. These are not big box centers or grocery anchored centers where customers are looking to transact and leave, but places people want to hang out in. We want more sales tax generation. And lastly, we want to improve our existing stock of shopping centers. Our opinion is that Bishop Branch is a place where the quality places belong. This will contribute to the sales tax base the City Center has, but it will not do much to fill the big box categories that were identified in the study. These uses belong in a lower density format, somewhere they would not detract from the walkability and vibrance of a core area, since they demand large surface parking fields. In addition, we feel that adding retail in Bishop Branch that is not centered around Bollinger Canyon Road will not work. The scale of our city is such that retail must have its energy focused on the prime locations to succeed. When it comes to everyday service retail, we feel that this should not be sprinkled throughout Bishop Branch. Grocery stores are under pressure that will continue to grow. New homes and customers will help these centers make the decision to upgrade tenants and reinvest. The last thing any of us want is zoning that will create inaction or vacancy. Mandating a minimum FAR for retail on a non-core site and expecting a developer to install 100,000 feet of retail under apartments will not work, because retail under apartments is parked in a structure. And the only type of retail that works parked in a structure in this market is a gathering place, which will only work in a focused format around city center. Different neighborhoods in Bishop Branch should have distinct characteristics and baskets of amenities to create a diverse group of places that become beloved by their constituents and add to a rich downtown fabric. Residents at the Summerhill site will own their own homes and be able to walk for a quick coffee or lunch in the adjacent Bishop Farms restaurant at BR8, or make a 10-minute walk to City Center or Crow Canyon Commons. Those that choose to live in Related's project will benefit from proximity to many more amenities, but they will choose to live in an elevator-served environment. These are choices that our new community members will have, and they are good choices and different ones than have historically been available in San Ramon. I mentioned before that vertical mixed use won't work outside the best retail locations in Bishop Ranch. We do see a vibrant vertical mixed use project on Bollinger at the former Chevron campus. It is on the going home side of the street and is a main location that supports both quality retail and apartment living, leading to an economically viable vertical mixed use development. In addition, we would like to concentrate the City Walk retail entitlement and its hotel on the southeast quadrant of 2600, along with the City Green Park, creating a 1- and 2-story retail environment that is also unique. These two expansions will be distinct from City Center, 2600 being much more flexible in its building type, adjacent to a beautiful new hotel and at the junction between the thriving conference center and City Center, and the vertical mixed use at Chevron having a true street life pub type atmosphere. We feel these expansions done in a cohesive plan with City Center will form a vibrant retail experience at the center of the downtown, enhancing the lives of all of our citizens, attracting new businesses, and giving our city the identity that it deserves. Additionally, the new housing units will deliver new customers to patronize the adjacent grocery anchored centers and lead to reinvestment. Spotty retail throughout Bishop Branch will detract from both the core and the existing centers. Here are some more images of today's experiences. Again, we want the new retail to rival City Center in the quality of place, but to have lower barriers to entry in terms of rent and build-out costs, which will leading to vendors with more frequent usage and a more local presence. These are building typologies of vertical mixed-use projects that we see elements of being incorporated into the retail on the former Chevron Park. Vertical mixed-use projects. These are images of lower density retail and a more flexible building type we see occurring north of City Center on the southeast segment of 2600 alongside the new hotel. Lastly, touching on housing. It is our view that delivering significant housing within Bishop Ranch in the next 10 years will be the engine that achieves these goals. It will provide a daytime population that will bring the vibrance and energy that we all want, which will make the additional retail development of the types described possible. It will enhance the identity of San Ramon by opening doors for people that prefer options other than a suburban subdivision. It will revitalize our stock of existing shopping centers, and it will allow us to attract the best companies in the Bay Area to occupy our office buildings. Just stating those 4 things is so exciting. Diversity, energy, commerce. This will truly be a distinct place in California. And it isn't out of reach because we're not starting from scratch. It stands on the shoulders of decades of progress in San Ramon. This is a quick review of what is underway so far. City Village by Summerhill on BR6, Belmont Senior Living, which is an exciting use to have in our downtown, and Related's apartment project, which will be unrivaled in the entire East Bay. And here are photos that you've already seen of those projects. maybe not Belmont's lobby in the upper right, which I think is pretty snazzy. The next several slides show examples of the housing product types that we envision for DMU South. They are complementary to what we entitled with City Walk, but their variety will allow them to be delivered on a faster timeline versus the 25-year City Walk plan that focuses on just the 5 and 7-story type product. The upper left, upper right, and lower right is the City Walk type of product, which we think some of should be on the Bollinger frontage of Chevron Park. The lower left shows some iconic townhomes, which we think would be a good product to have around a park. If we have a large central park, we think establishing that type of brownstone design, repeated but great design, would be a nice feature to give neighborhoods a great identity. And here are some brownstones, some additional townhomes, basically a variety of different types of housing, which can be delivered in a quicker timeline than City Walk. When the prospect of reacquiring the Chevron campus arose, we saw an opportunity to further the goals previously discussed for Bishop Ranch and for the city of San Ramon. We understood how critical it was to approach the plan with a holistic view from a planning, civic, and placemaking perspective, and to be cognizant that this place needs to serve San Ramon as a whole. The key elements of the plan that we see are higher density development along Bollinger Canyon Road, inclusive of a concentrated retail, commercial, vertical mixed-use project, complementary but distinct to city center with a more street life feel. A variety of housing typologies and tenure, scaling down towards the south to complement Inverness Park. A large central park, pocket parks and pedestrian pathways throughout, including a linear park around the perimeter of the site that provides an extension of the walking district and a buffer to the existing homes to the south. And tonight we've put together a drawing, a schematic that shows the existing office buildings in pink, the City Walk entitlement in orange, the housing opportunity sites you've been discussing in a lighter orange, the Chevron Park site in the blue with the list of items I just mentioned, with some numbers: 125,000 feet of mixed-use retail and entertainment, 1,250 apartments, 1,000 homes and condos, and a dashed line of what we view as the core of the downtown. And within that core, if you add the adjacent shopping centers, you've got almost 1 million square feet of retail, which is significant. So with that, I would leave it to discussion, and I don't know what your choice on the next step is, but happy to answer any questions or.
Thank you. So why don't we start with some commission questions, and then we're going to go to public comment, and then we'll wrap up with additional comments and discussions, if that works for everybody. Okay. Commissioner Marks, looks like you're ready to grab the mic.
This is more of a request than a question, but it's also a question. The graphics that you just showed us on page 13 of your document, is there a chance we can get a larger scale version of those to take? Otherwise, I was going to ask you to chip in on the magnifying glass and help me understand this. But if we can get a larger one to use throughout this process, that would be very helpful.
For sure.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Additional questions at this point? Commissioner Wallace.
Commissioner Marks beat me to the request for the slides. I just want to say that I think the slide that you have up here right now is probably the most important one that you put in front of us, because it's hard to judge a proposed development the size of Chevron Park without seeing how it fits into the rest of the city. And the way you've done that is, I think, very helpful to us. I found it particularly helpful that you have designated our housing opportunity sites in the Bishop Ranch area, which is where most of our housing opportunity sites go, as you know. I think that that's very important in terms of trying to figure out where all this fits together in the way that works best for the city. So I want to thank you for putting this all together. And I want to also thank you for refraining from coming up with large plans that are down to the details of 10-foot doorways and things like that, because I think this overall 10,000-foot view of the city can engender a lot more meaningful discussion than a prepackaged deal that we're sort of working around the edges for. So thank you. And like Commissioner Marks, I have some additional comments, but since I was restricted mostly to questions, thank you.
Certainly. Commissioner Edwards?
So I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Wallace just mentioned. What is the period of time that you're looking at building out this area?
I said 10 years.
Okay.
The higher density elements in the front could be more phased, but I think delivering on the neighborhoods would be quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kuznick, do you have any questions at this point?
No.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and open public comment, and we'll start. Do we have any speaker cards or questions on Zoom? We'll start with speaker cards.
Yes, we received a speaker card from Bill Clarkson.
Okay.
It's a lot more fun being on this side. First off, I want to say I think this is a great opportunity to create a really vibrant mixed-use neighborhood. I think this has all the potential of creating truly a destination neighborhood. Although it should be noted in capital letters, the project will anchor the southern portion of the walking district, and it will serve as a gateway towards Inverness Park in the southern part of San Ramon, connecting people to the Iron Horse Trail, but also south to Athens Downs Park. The project's a one-time opportunity to enhance and expand the walking district that we could only have dreamt of a few years ago. First, I want to make clear that I think the commission should add language, and I've already heard that from the applicant about including the walking districts. That's great. It was one of my first concerns. The second is that the plan should not place any undue burdens on the neighborhood to the south. It should be done reasonably and accommodate spacing for them. Currently, those neighborhoods enjoy a wide greenbelt area that was put in by Chevron and shepherded by Chevron, including walking trails. I think one of the important things, aside from the walking trail behind the homes on Chevron, there should be also very wide a trail going from that through the center of this project to city center. Encourage people to walk to city center from that neighborhood. The main street, I've heard some comments up there. The main street, where all the shopping and stuff will be. One idea is, and I've seen this in some areas, where one side of the street has a really wide sidewalk. So one is normal, the other one is wide, allowing for pop-outs and other events. I think Santana Row has this big white island in the middle of the road, and it's hard to get to and hard to use. They should have put all that on one side of the street, would have been much more functional. There's a gate at the western end of Inverness Park going right into that subdivision. I think that should be, it was opened up at one time. People used to use it all the time. For security reasons, after 9/11, I got locked up. And this project opens up and it becomes a residential neighborhood. It'd be great to have that open. In my opinion, I like the concept that the applicant talked about having the home step up in size from lower to taller as it goes towards Bollinger. One idea you might want to consider is over on a street called Bridal Court that I think Mr. Wallace was on, where it was on the side of a hill and all the homes on the view side had to be single story to minimize the impact on the valley view looking up at the homes. And all the homes across the street on this other side were all two-story. And it's one of the most popular, vibrant, I'll tell you, those homes, single-story homes that are along that one side are one of the most desired neighborhoods in the area. The last thing is the finances. I think it's really important, whatever you do, that there be language, concrete language, to make sure that this project will be revenue neutral to the city finances. And that all the services required for all the residents will be fully paid for by whatever mechanisms you put in place to handle the police, streets, all those services and parks. And that was it. Thank you very much for consideration. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Bill. Okay.
Taiwan Country.
Okay.
First of all, it's a treat to see former Mayor Clarkson. He did a great job during his term with our city. It's really nice to have his input. I would like to, share some comments or, sentiments that I have coming to all these different city meetings. I feel that lately, in light of trying to integrate everything, we are really blurring and overlooking that in our society, under this nation, it is separation of power. We have very specific governments and jurisdictions now are unfortunately being blurred in the name of, integration and, whatever lifestyle that our officials imagine. For example, I think it's great that Sunset is going to take care of a private property that is a park, but accessible by the public. I'm not sure if this kind of concept will continue at the Chevron, area, however you develop. As a taxpayer and a public, I just would like you guys to please incorporate our law enforcement. Whatever you're doing, in my opinion, you're making their job harder. For example, now we invite the public who may not be aware of our culture in our city, and they think that it's okay to do certain things that is inappropriate in our city. But now because it's on a private property with public, attendees there, now the police is really, forced to either offend the taxpayers by saying we can't do anything about it, or, they risk basically invading into private property to enforce their law. There has to be a clarification in terms of law enforcement for civil peace. And that is my general comment. I personally don't have any specifics for you guys. I just wish you guys would please make sure law enforcement is incorporated in all of your planning. Thank you.
Any other speaker cards at this time?
No more speaker cards.
Okay, and do we have anybody on Zoom with their hand raised?
No.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and close public comment? At this time, I think we're open for discussion, and I noticed that there is a full-size set of plans or this map here in the back. And so if the commission feels it's important to take a 5-minute recess to go look at it, you're welcome to, or we can just do our best with there. But why don't we go ahead and put that one slide back up on the screen for now? And of course, anybody in the audience that wishes to look at the back, that's welcome. And, the city will accept comments and will gather them and forward any comments or written comments sent in or emails. They'll forward those all to Sunset. Okay. So at this point, this is the first time we've actually done a big piece of blank property and had the chance to offer feedback this early. So, we've not done this before, so we will do our best, So I will look to see if somebody wants to start the discussion going. And normally we would be in, the big open room and around in square tables. So it's a little bit more difficult here to have a workshop like this, but, there will be future opportunities to continue to do more workshops. And, we were already talking to staff about figuring out a different way to do this so we can be around tables and charrettes and like we've done in the past. So tonight is open mic night.
I'm pushing my button.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna start us off here. They always, in the opening act here. So a couple of things is, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. It really covered a lot of the aspects and your thinking process. So that's very, very helpful. I'm really pleased by how you're looking at this property to involve both office space and retail and housing. I will say, and thank you again, because we also were able to tour the property. So I want to thank you for that time and opportunity. One of the things that I said during the walking about was I have concerns about the busyness of Bollinger Canyon Road. And one of the things that, and again, as I look at this map, while I wholeheartedly agree with the idea of adding to the walking district, but I'm also a little nervous, to be honest, that exiting from where the Chevron entrance is now across that into the city center area represents crossing a very, very busy street, very close to the freeway, lots of lanes. And in my experience, some, I don't know, angry drivers that are intent on getting somewhere, shall we say. And probably that's going to be a concern for me going forward. There's all kinds of possibilities. They all probably cost a lot of money, but it is a concern. And I want the walkability to not be diminished because the street's just so darn busy. Now, that might be something as simple as a little commuter trolley that operates or something like that. The other opportunity is, and I said this to you yesterday, was while there's a natural focus towards city center, you could orient everything 90 degrees facing more towards Mount Diablo in the east. That way the access points people closer to where we are putting the pedestrian overcrossing. And it moves them down to Camino Ramon, where the crossing of the street there is not as dicey if you're a pedestrian with a stroller and dog getting across there at Sunset and Bollinger. So, I mean, those are much more farther down the road, but as you are planning these things and thinking about them, that's something that I worry about. Thank you.
Commissioner Kuznick, since this is a workshop and we're gonna have a little bit more dialogue than normal monologues. So they may want to, no, it's fine. No, I'm just going to try and facilitate a bit. There are a lot of elements of this, but since Commissioner Kuznick brought up traffic and Bollinger, perhaps if any commissioners have comments there, we can kind of talk about that. So we have more of a conversation as opposed to each of us speaking independently, you know? No, I'm just, you spoke. I'm just trying to facilitate here to see if anybody else came
I'm
with thoughts.
also willing for you to say gently, you don't know what you're talking about. but
Oh, no,
that's okay.
As a reminder, this is, analogous to brainstorming where there's no such thing as bad comments or bad ideas. Not tonight. Traffic, Bollinger, entrance to the property, any comments, observations, anybody wishes to share in that area?
I will, but it's not really a concern more than a caution to us. And that is, certainly we're going to take a look at this project under the Environmental Quality Act. There'll be a detailed traffic analysis. One of the things that we found when we did the City Walk project, which for those people who have read a lot of traffic analyses was evident, but nonetheless, City Walk was really a net plus to the system. When you took a look at the office peaks and you compare them to the residential peaks, either AM or PM, the system was not as impacted. And so that's something that we can keep in mind now. We're going to be adding some uses. And at some point, we're going to simply have to take a look at, is there a level of service impact below what our standard is, and what mitigation may be possible? But I understand Bollinger is a busy street. We need to keep in mind that there will be a pedestrian overpass that gets constructed in the hopefully not too distant future at the Iron Horse Trail, for those people who do feel threatened or uncomfortable crossing the street. But I don't at this point anticipate any significant issues relative to traffic.
Okay. I did not have that on my list either, traffic per se. Does somebody else want to open up another topic that they want to provide
Yeah.
feedback? You want to go ahead, Rick? Thank you.
I'm going to be a little bit wordy, but partly because this is just a rare opportunity. And I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that we got to tour the property yesterday. And I appreciate the fact that we are not working from a set of plans. We are simply talking to each other about ideas. And I assume that means flexibility both on our part and on the applicant's part. I intend to be pretty flexible relative to what happens on the property with one area that I have a concern about. And I expressed this to the staff and the applicant yesterday, and that is the Inverness Park shared property line. I do believe you have to go back to a strategy that the city employed even years before we got our most recent RENA numbers. And that was when we have to build higher density housing, put it in the downtown area, assuming that the Sunset Development was willing to do that, which they were, in order not to overwhelm or change the character of existing single family neighborhoods. And I think that's a very sensible strategy. In fact, as I travel around the Bay Area and as I think back on cities I've worked in, not a lot of them would have had a Bishop Ranch area in which to do what we are going to do in order to protect our neighborhoods. That being an important principle for me here, the Inverness Park neighborhood, which is a long-time established neighborhood, butts up to the southern property line here, and we need to have a very particular focus on how we treat that neighborhood. And so I'm going to be a little bit more explicit in a few minutes, but the rest of the site planning and the land uses, I intend to be pretty flexible about what the applicant wants to do. You know, when you do large acreage planning, one of the things that you should be doing is not just taking a look at what an applicant is looking for, but to ask yourself a couple of questions. The first is, what are the unmet needs of the city? And secondly, what are the undermet needs of the city? And is the subject property a candidate site to handle some of that? Not necessarily all of that, but some of that. To my way of thinking, and predictably, I'm sure, housing was an unmet and undermet need in our city, particularly if we can get it so that it's really affordable to people who need affordable workforce housing. That's something of a misnomer in this market, but as well as we can do, I think that we need to do that. The second thing that I would have thought we'd need to do is retail, but I don't think we can talk about retail in such a generic way. I'm concerned about neighborhood serving retail. Neighborhood serving retail that provides the kind of services that on a weekly basis or a regular basis, people need to sustain their families. I'm going to compare that to City Center, which I think is an excellent project and provides some very nice upscale retail, but it's not the kind of retail that you go shopping every week. At least I don't. And it's not the kind of retail that sustains a neighborhood. And so, while I don't mean in any way to be less than complimentary to what's at City Center, what I'm hoping we can do, what we can find, what the applicant can tell us the market will support, is neighborhood serving retail that not only serves that neighborhood, but will become something of a destination shopping experience for people who don't live in that particular neighborhood. And while I, in the future, will want to explore something that Mr. Mayron said about parking and retail, I have a few different thoughts that may or may not be accurate. I'd like to explore that during this process, but retail that only served that property won't survive. It has to be retail that's neighborhood serving, that's attractive to my family that lives in Twin Creeks, or somebody who lives over in Bollinger Hills. And again, I think there's an opportunity here, and I think the applicant tonight has talked about that. I do think that office space is important. I moved to this city about 32 years ago, and back then, it was the Bishop Ranch why a lot, if not most people, a lot of people lived here. It was the employment base of the city. Yes, there were other employment areas, but it was the employment base. The world is changing. Office uses are changing. What is deemed to be Class A space is different than it used to be. But there is a space in our overall pantheon of land uses for office uses. And I'm glad that the applicant is talking about that. I will be asking later on, again, in the process, not necessarily tonight, in today's world, what distinguishes, what characteristics distinguish Class A space and a Class A area to work in from what used to be the case? I believe that we can't neglect our office and employment base in this city and expect people to be living here or to be able to afford to stay here. And so again, I'm pleased that that's a part of the land use, but through this overall development process, I want to explore more of what you know and react less to what I think I know. I want to say that when you do large scale planning on a large piece of property, the starting point is your site plan. Well, the starting point is actually what are the land uses that you are proposing to put into the property, and then it becomes largely a site planning function. That requires an awareness on our part of the intended uses. It requires an awareness of what those uses could do to adjacent properties, to abutting properties, and what are the mitigations that may be possible through design or other actions the city could take to allow the use, but to allow it in such a way that it is located in the proper location, it is screened the way it should be, the scale of the building is such that it fits in with its place on the site. And again, given the abutting and Inverness Park properties and the shared property line, again, I'm concerned about what will the specific type and mix of land uses be, what are the property line setbacks, the building scale, and I'd like to see in this process, and I'm sure the applicant's design team, if they themselves don't do this, are familiar with what are called bubble diagrams before you actually get into site planning, where you lay out on the property in bubble form what are the land uses that you're talking about in that area and what are some of the characteristics of those land uses. I'd like to see some alternative bubble diagrams for the property and some alternative site plans for the property. I believe that it is possible to accommodate all of what the uses that are being proposed, but I want to talk in particular about my site planning concerns relative to Inverness Park. This is the framework that I'll be using when I review whatever comes out of this process. The first is no vehicular access from or egress to Ascot Drive in the Inverness Park area. I've heard that there are a couple of properties that at one point were still under the ownership or there was the ability to use them by Sunset in furtherance of Bishop Ranch. I don't know if that's still the case, but no access into the neighborhood directly. Secondly, the land use is closest to the Inverness Park property line, in my view, should be single-family residential units of the same scale as the residential units that you find in the Inverness Park area. And that could be single family detached units. It could be townhouses, very similar to what you showed us tonight. And I'm not talking about design. I'm just saying that scale. Could be patio homes, could be duets or duplexes. So housing that's similar to what we approved on the BR6 property. That's what the land use ought to be. That's closest to the Inverness Park neighborhood. I think, however, one of the things that I would start with before I even located the housing is between the Inverness Park residential units and the Chevron parking lots that abut or are very close to that property line, there is what I call a tree line, and there's the walking path. And the tree line is reasonable dimension, given that there are there's parking on the other side of it. But I would like to see that area is expanded in depth. I don't know what the depth is now. When we walked the other day, I tried to get in a sense of it in my own view, but something that's, more than what's there now. I'm not saying it has to be 100 feet, but it should be something that allows for fairly dense reforestation of parts of the tree line, maintenance of the existing tree line, enhancement of the walking area. And then if this is going to be a part of the walking district, which I think is a terrific idea, and I'm very pleased to hear you say that, seating areas, benches, turnouts, areas that will attract people to come to it, not just pass through it. If single family housing is not the land use that is closest to the Inverness Park property, and more intense either traffic generating or noise generating uses are proposed, I might be looking for an 8 or even a 10-foot tall stone sound attenuation wall to be constructed along there. That's not optimal, in my opinion. And again, if the proper land use is abut the existing residential, then it's really just a neighborhood. It's just a typical sort of neighborhood where you have different kind of housing. But if for some reason a large multi-story building had to be close, then I think the neighbors would have every legitimate right to expect that the city will focus on noise attenuation as well as scale and design and landscape. Things that we often forget about as planners are, where's the trash pickup area? At 6 in the morning in my neighborhood, every Tuesday morning, the guys are great. They pick up the stuff. I don't need an alarm clock on Tuesdays. I just have to leave the window open slightly. But I don't want to impose that on somebody else. Where we locate the trash bins and the service areas it is important and should right from the beginning, so that we're not trying to retrofit something at the end, be included in that. With that site planning criteria, there's a process that I think we should follow. And tonight is a great start to that process. I think there should be a follow-up meeting that, again, just takes a look at either bubble diagrams or alternative site plans and nothing else. No landscaping, no buildings, no architecture, nothing. Just how are we going to arrange these land uses in such a way that it's a win for Sunset and it's a win for the neighborhood? And if we do that it probably wouldn't take more than one meeting. From my standpoint, again, I want to stress this because I'm getting into some detail here and I'm not trying to scare Sunset away. I will be very flexible about the rest of what you do. I will let you're going to tell me what the market will allow, and I'm not going to argue with you about that. But I do feel that the commission has an obligation to protect the Inverness Park area. When it comes to architecture way downstream, I'm simply going to say in General Plan 2035, in the land use policies and residential development section where the policies are laid out, policy 4.6-I-9 on page 4-30 explains the city's 360-degree design principles. That's important to me, again, because I'm looking at the Inverness Park area, and I don't want there to be a flat building that has no architecture. It's simply the wall of a building. I think we need to be sensitive that way. I asked yesterday, and I would be pleased if not tonight, if during the process, you could explain what I call the triggers in some detail that allow you to either sell the property or develop the property. What are the conditions today and that you're looking forward to in the next number of years that allow you to do the retail or the housing? What are the constraints? What are the opportunities? It's one thing to be a planning commissioner and apply the general plan or a specific plan or any other plan. It is quite a different thing to be in the marketplace as often as you are. And again, I have my sense of the market. I even talk, weird as it may be, with a group of retired planners to see if we can figure out what's going on. But you're in the marketplace, in the real world. I need to understand that before I say, yes, this is a great land use or it makes sense. And again, especially regarding parking, as you described it relative to retail. I'm looking at that for office. I'm looking at that for, again, neighborhood serving retail. I have finally two suggestions or requests. And this is something that we among ourselves up here need to discuss as well as with Sunset. And that is, as a part of this overall development review process, I think there ought to be a development agreement or some other enforceable legal document from any housing developer. If you're not that developer, then a future one, to the that expresses that they are not going to fee out under the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. They need to build the affordable housing that we need. It needs to be available under the requirements of state law, which I believe is 55 years. We have an ungodly number of RHNA obligated housing units to produce, and we can't allow feeing out, especially at inexpensive prices, to be the way that we go on 15%. If you take a look at 15% of the numbers that we could produce and you allow them to fee out, we will miss our targets. We will put more pressure, therefore, on other lands in the city. And that doesn't make sense to me. So I'm looking for developers to build what needs to be built and to do it in a way that we can all be proud of what gets built. And lastly, I would request that given the importance of this redevelopment and its potential on the city's core, especially the traffic, that when the environmental documents are prepared, that there be a public scoping session regarding the range of actions, alternatives, and mitigation measures and significant efforts to be analyzed, and hold it under the provisions of section 15083, early public consultation of the CEQA guidelines. I think that this is a project that's going to command a lot of public attention, public concern. I don't have any concern that we can't meet what the public is concerned about, but I believe they have the right to know what's going to go on and to not be surprised at some later date. So lastly, let me say once again, Sunset, I greatly appreciate what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm very supportive of where I think you want to go. I just need to understand things more than I do right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Trying to think through, we want to ask and discuss anything you said first, or we want to move on to other comments, but I do want to try and turn this into a discussion at some point. Commissioner Edwards, would you like to go now?
Sure. So thank you. This is unprecedented to have an opportunity like this. And I also appreciate the opportunity to just offer up just general unconstrained feedback about visions and hypotheticals. This is a very exciting opportunity, and I think that the work that you've done and what you've presented for the City Walk project, my hope is that the City Walk project allows this community to get excited about the opportunity that we have here, and to get excited that Sunset Development is the one that's in control of this project. City Walk is just very unusual. And it's very additive. Nobody's taking anything away except for surface parking. It's a very interesting project. This site, it seems to me, the really controlling factor is the proximity to the 680 corridor, the existing retail, and the proximity to a lot of medium density housing. This is an excellent opportunity site to see some higher density product being built. And for that reason, I would like to see single family housing be the exception, not the rule on this site. Because it is so close to the freeway and so close to the existing retail, this is one of those rare opportunities where I would like to see some higher density development go in. Perhaps higher density than anything else that we have in the city or in this area. Certainly not the norm, but I think that there's an opportunity to put some higher density product in there, and to include some greater affordability. If Sunset has the ability to come up with a way to do permanent affordable housing throughout the development, that would also be something that I would like to see. What I'm concerned about, particularly with some of the other projects that we've seen recently, the thing I don't want to see is have us underuse this site by building minimum density townhomes, minimum density single family homes. There is a place for that in San Ramon. I feel very strongly that this is not it. If we're going to have single family homes in this area, I would like to see them no less dense than what we've got at the Summerhill project. The retail concepts that I think you've brought forward, I do support them. I like the concept of having the retail fronting on Bollinger Canyon, and I'm interested to see how you propose to do that while at the same time integrating the retail with the housing and with some office. I don't want to see something that looks like a strip mall. You know, I like the vision that you're putting forward. I like the concept of integrating this new area with what's there. And I think the connectivity is very important. I do disagree with Commissioner Marks in terms of whether and how this community gets connected to the single family home community to the south. I'm not sure how you do that, but I would love to see you explore it. And I would love to see Sunset do some outreach to the people that live in that neighborhood to find out how they feel about being connected to more of the city center. I can certainly envision that there's some people that live in that neighborhood that don't want anything to do with this higher density neighborhood. They don't want anything to do with the downtown center core. And I would imagine that there's some folks who might be newer to the neighborhood and would be very excited about that opportunity. So I'd love to see it explored, and I'd love to see the outreach happen. And I think that's all. I look forward to seeing some more concrete ideas, and I'd love to, I do agree with Commissioner Marks. I'd love to see some more ideas before we start to see a project. And I'd love to get a little bit of a greater understanding about what you think is a realistic timeline to bring the different component pieces of this to market. Because I do think that delivering it as a package would be really special for this community.
Point of clarification on the connectivity to Inverness Park, Commissioner Marks was commenting specifically around vehicle access between the two neighborhoods. Were you also concerned about walking paths connecting the neighborhoods? No.
I think walking paths connecting the neighborhoods is a really good idea.
But you're also interested in vehicle connectivity too, or just walking, just to make sure?
I don't know about vehicle. Definitely pedestrian.
Okay.
I'd love to see there be some connection.
Okay.
I'd love to see some connection, and that can mean so many different things. But yeah, I mean, in terms of creating a more walkable San Ramon, absolutely. Pedestrian access, absolutely.
Okay.
But again, I mean, there's going to be people in the Inverness neighborhood who do not want that, who want this project to be over on that side of the wall and their nice, quiet neighborhood on another side of the wall. So part of it is, are people in the existing community receptive? And what are they receptive to? Because there's so many different ways. There's so many different ways to do it.
Good. Thank you for clarifying that. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you. Let me start first by talking about the Chevron site as it exists. I was told that because of the way it was laid out, it really is not suitable for anything other than a single tenant, which is what Chevron was. And since I haven't heard of Apple or Google pounding on Sunset's door to take it over and run it as their East Bay campus, I think that we have to look at what is an appropriate use for that space. I agree with Mr. Mayron about the issue of office space. While no one has a crystal ball, I think that the issue of hybrid work, especially for the type of people that he is trying to attract to Bishop Ranch, probably will be a fact of life for at least the next 5, 10, maybe farther years out than that. As a result, statistics that he gave us for the actual employee utilization of space in Bishop Ranch, I think are reasonably accurate. I say that because I have a case dealing with a tenant in Silicon Valley who went through the hybridization process and as a result needed a lot less space than they contracted for. So I think that the idea of not putting in office space, at least as a significant portion of the Chevron Park property, is probably a good one. You have enough space in Bishop Ranch as it is now. You certainly have enough of the newer buildings probably to accommodate it. And it seems to me from your comments that you've reached at the same conclusion as that. So that basically leaves what else would go in there. Well, the obvious choice is housing for a number of reasons, one of which is our arena numbers. We are being mandated by the state to rip out commercial areas in the city of San Ramon and put in housing. This is obviously an excellent opportunity to do just that with a minimum disruption to the city, because the space you're proposing to redevelop is one that needs to be redeveloped under any circumstance. So I think housing is an appropriate opportunity for that area. I agree with Commissioner Edwards about the type of housing. Now, as Mr. Engen knows, I've made a couple of comments about the product that's in Bishop and BR6 City Village. In terms of that goal for that type of housing, I think that the way it was laid out and the type of housing that was generated for that area is appropriate to meet the needs of that particular niche in housing. The problem that exists, as Commissioner Edwards pointed out and Commissioner Marks alluded to, is the fact that what we really don't need in San Ramon are more 2,200 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath houses. Our arena numbers are 5,000, but that's misleading because 3,000 of those are what's called affordable housing. And part of those are very low and low income. And there is no way a person who falls into those brackets can buy a house or even rent a house of the type that's in BR6. So we have to look at a type of housing that we can go to HCD with a straight face and say, we are actually making efforts to meet our requirements for affordable housing. And I think Commissioner Edwards is dead on when she says that at least a portion of the housing in that area should be devoted to higher density, smaller units that can be affordable to normal people who don't have the type of knowledge jobs that obviously would be the type of person you would want to have in Bishop Ranch, not only to live, but also to patronize the city center area. So I agree with her about the need for some density in that area. And I believe that when we did the walking tour yesterday, there seemed to be a willingness to think about higher densities in the core of the Chevron Park area, not next to Inverness Park, but certainly in the central area and maybe along Bollinger. After all, you do have, I think, a 7-story apartment building fronting on Bollinger. That's fairly close to the Marketplace Shopping Center. I think that that would be appropriate for the frontage you're talking about on Bollinger. And if you could combine it with some type of signage that showed the people driving up Bollinger and say, would otherwise go into Doherty Valley, that there is a there, they can stop and have a beer or have dinner or something. There's an activity there they can participate in. That would be an enormous aid to developing that area as not necessarily a destination site, but a neighborhood that has the services that Commissioner Marks was talking about. To digress a bit, I live about a mile from the Blackhawk Shopping Center. And the problem with that shopping center has always been that you look at its back. You never see anything that's actually inside the shopping center. And there is precious little a way to see that as you're driving up Blackhawk Road or Crow Canyon Road. But if you were able to meet that problem, I think that you would be able to have the sort of retail that you're talking about, the type that we talked about on our tour, like the pub that everybody wants to go to or things like that. But I think there needs to be some high density in that area. I agree with Commissioner Marks and Commissioner Edwards about the area that's adjacent to Inverness Park. But as I understand it from our tour yesterday, so do you. You're not looking to put in the BR1 type apartment building next to Ascot Drive. So I think that's important. The connectivity, I think, is important, but that's something you can work out to have connectivity. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was to take a holistic view of this development. I don't look at this development as an isolated, let's draw lines around Chevron Park and talk about it to the exclusion of all else. You alluded to in your comments that this is a part of the overall master plan, and that's lowercase master plan for the Bishop Ranch development. And I think that is the appropriate way to look at it. I found it interesting, Mr. Marin's comments that were made on several occasions, that he does not see, and if I'm misstating you, please correct me at some appropriate time when I'm not totally embarrassed, that there is little appetite, shall we say, for vertical mixed use outside the core area, which basically is the city center, and he's including in what we've euphemistically referred to as downtown mixed use south, i.e. Chevron Park. The problem, you may be right, but if you look at the map, and I appreciate you putting the map up there, if you look at the map of San Ramon, what you see is probably in the neighborhood of 4,500, 5,000 dwelling units in the core area between City Walk and what you're proposing or will wind up proposing for the Chevron property. But where is the type of neighborhood serving businesses that Commissioner Marks alluded to that is going to serve those people, particularly in the context of the commuting style and time that you were talking about? the 15-minute walk or the 5-minute bike ride. By the way, I don't think riding bikes is going to be much of a commute if you have to go to the grocery store, but where are you going to have those businesses? Now, the map is very interesting because you have Marketplace and you have Crow Canyon Commons. Marketplace being in the upper right-hand corner. But as you know, there was a project that was before the Planning Commission recently to tear out a huge chunk of that shopping center, and particularly the grocery store area, and convert it into housing, sort of the same type that you have at BR6. We also have housing opportunity sites on another portion of that shopping center. So it is quite feasible that in the next couple of years, as you are building out Chevron Park, that the retail opportunities in Marketplace will not exist. Well, that leaves Crow Canyon Commons at the other end of Bishop Ranch along Crow Canyon Road. Now, fortunately, that area is no longer a housing opportunity site, but it is mixed use. That enables a developer to come in and to raise the shopping center and put in mostly housing. If that happens, where are the people at Chevron Park and City Walk and the housing opportunity sites that show up in light green on your drawing going to go for the needs that Commissioner Marks described? Not to mention the 5 bags of groceries they need for milk and food to feed their family. So you may be right that mixed use in a vertical setting might not work in Bishop Ranch, but it seems to me that given what you've laid out and that these housing opportunity sites will most likely be developed as 100% housing, because they probably will be able to do that. It really raises a question of where these neighborhoods that we've created, so to speak, are going to be served in terms of anything other than parking their car and working at the home office. Now, I raised a question yesterday about the space around BR 2600 that the City Walk plan called for as flex space. Now, you have it as mostly office space with a possibility of some retail there. It seems to me, and I don't own it, but it seems to me that if you are serious about not having retail outside the core area, that you need to, or should, to be a little bit more gentle about it, take another look at that City Walk area being set aside for neighborhood serving businesses, as Commissioner Marks described. Otherwise, you're going to have a desert for people's needs between Crow Canyon Road and Bollinger. You can have great businesses and retail establishments in the Chevron Park area, and I hope you do. But I question whether you're going to be able to draw people that are in the middle of Bishop Ranch, say BR6, over across Bollinger to that area. So I think that's something we need to look at, and as a holistic review of what you're proposing to do. It may be that there are areas currently zoned or planned for mixed use that need to be rezoned something else. It may be that the housing opportunity sites in Bishop Ranch can be just made high density residential, because that seems to be the most efficient way to do that. It may be that some of the mixed use areas now need to be changed to commercial mixed use to preserve the retail, because if you're not going to put retail and neighborhood serving businesses in the middle of Bishop Ranch, you're going to need to save them at the bookends. So I look at this project as not simply one to be able to build high-class housing and retail and a variety of housing in the core area of the city, but to take another look at the way our city is being built out in the center to make sure that what we are planning to do in the next 5, 10, or 20 years is something that provides the type of needs that our city dwellers will want to have. The person who works 2 days a week at BR6 they will still need to go out 3 days a week because, as you probably already know, you can sit there and work in your home office for 8 hours and you go stir crazy. You need to get out and have a cup of coffee or God knows a beer. So that's something that needs to be thought about where you're going to put those things, because and the whole concept of having neighborhoods is you don't have to hop in your car and go to downtown Danville to have a decent meal or a beer. You can walk down the street and get a beer, talk to someone, come back and do your work. But you have to be able to plan for those type of activities, at least make an effort to do so. Now, maybe Mr. Maron's right that simply won't work in between Crow and Bollinger, maybe. But I think we have an opportunity for what you're planning on doing at Chevron Park to rethink that and plan for the entire Bishop Ranch area and not just Chevron Park. I appreciate the fact that you gave us this map that allows us to think about these things. And again, as I said before, that you came in with ideas and pictures and not basically drawings that say, here's what we're going to do and ask us to bless it. I appreciate your taking. This is a big thing. This may not be any bigger than trying to do BR 2600, but it's pretty damn close. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And I hope that you are willing to do that in the future going forward, because I believe, as I think my fellow commissioners do, that where reasonable people can sit down and plan, what comes out of it will be a product that you, as the owner of Bishop Ranch, and us as the representatives of the city of San Ramon, really appreciate. So I thank you for coming to us, and I look forward to working with you in the future on this.
Okay, I'll make a few comments. Then the way I think I'd like to handle is then we'll take another round. And if anybody has additional comments or different additional thoughts based on everything we've talked about, and certainly you're able to comment. Do you want to comment now? Sure.
First of all, I totally agree with everything I've heard tonight. We'll bring everything back and we'll respond to everything, but I do want to just clarify one thing about the retail. I want to what I was trying to say is that there's uses where people want to drive and pick up a bunch of grocery bags and go right back to their car in a convenient way, put the bags in there and drive back to their house. And they probably won't ride a bike. I forget that unless they have one of those big cargo ones, which are expensive. We feel like, and you mentioned downtown Danville, when you're at the Starbucks there at Hearts and the Veterans Building, that is the type of format that we're thinking would be appropriate on Southeast, but also the type of tenants we'd like to see on both the two new nodes. As you migrate south towards Walgreens or CVS or whatever, that's when you get into the big surface parking lots that we already have a lot of that. And so I think, Whole Foods and Target will serve a lot of these people, but those shopping centers in our area are suffering. And I think people that occupy the housing we're talking about will still want to get in their car and drive, or, my wife always gets things delivered to the house. But all these models are putting pressure on grocery stores. I think we have enough of that type of center, and we want them to be invested in. We do want the neighborhood serving retail in suburbia would traditionally be adjacent to those grocery stores in those strip centers. But we'd like to put them in a higher density format with structured parking, along with uses that have a longer dwell time for the customer, like city center, but with a different type of tenant, so that you can get groceries in a smaller form. Maybe it's a butcher, maybe it's a produce deal, maybe it's a hair salon, bookstore, if those hopefully still exist. But it's I think that those grocery store uses is a different trip and a different customer than what we're talking about in the city in the core area. And I think if you're talking about a place where people hang out, it should be in a more dense format. It shouldn't be dominated by surface parking, which means structured parking, which means you have to have a more dense development where on Chevron Park, and the example I mentioned, the vertical mixed use, that housing will provide the economic benefit that allows you to have that type of street retail below it. Same thing, that's what happened in Santana Row. And so that's how we think we can have feasibility to create that environment that you're talking about without the dominance of a grocery store, which we don't think you need a lot more of. Yeah, so that sort of explains this structured parking, surface parking, tactical use versus hangout place dynamic that we're talking about. I don't know if that provided any more clarity, but.
Well, a little bit, but I am very interested to see what your ideas are to effectuate that in between Crow and Bollinger.
Great. Okay, we look forward to presenting that. Thanks.
Okay. So a lot of great comments, and I'll just add a few of my own just to emphasize. Agreeing with Commissioner Marks on the connectivity between the neighborhood to the south and this project. I appreciate yesterday on the walking tour, it seems like Sunset is thinking similarly to us, that you don't put 5 or 6 or 7 stories right next to the neighborhood, but more like the 1 or 2 to match the housing to the south. I'll say connecting the 2 neighborhoods via walking trails or bike trails makes absolute sense. I don't think there's a way to get a car to drive through there the way it's laid out on Ascot into Dumbarton, but I would just agree that car access, no, but walking trails, absolutely. Also, when it comes to the land use and the site plan, I think we've all sort of said it, step up to Bollinger, where it's lowest, closest to Inverness, and 5, 6, 7 stories or 85 feet, I guess is really a better accurate way to describe the height, closer to the boulevard to Bollinger Canyon. I think Bollinger is a great place to have active services facing the street, ones that people want to go in to use. And then the backside or scattered farther back into the neighborhood could be the things that are more destination, whether it's the dry cleaners, the hair cleaner, hair salon. But I think the idea of having active uses on Bollinger makes a lot of sense to me. I agree with Mr. Marks, our inclusionary housing ordinance as currently written, allows people to fee out. And I also do hope that, anything that gets proposed, we're actually building the units, not just feeing out. Not a lot of comments, but I had some comments on parks, trails, open space throughout the project. Yesterday, when we went on the walk around the property, there are some pretty spectacular oak trees. And I know you've already said that you plan to build those in, but just to add my emphasis, the trails walking around it, the wide trails, and even though Commissioner Marks didn't say it, the all-weather trails and avoiding decomposed granite that fades away, I think is always important. I was thinking a little bit about parks, whether it's better to have large parks that feed the whole community or small parks that just are tot lots. And from a layout standpoint, there's going to be a lot of units, and I'm kind of on the fence a little bit, but I think I opt and would prefer a larger park versus a lot of small ones, more of a gathering place that people could go to, and it actually is a destination for everybody. And of course, with the trails, and if they're wide enough, those actually look like small parks along the way with benches and seating and things like that. It wasn't said, but I think you also said it yesterday. The wrought iron fence that Chevron had to put up after 9/11, I think should come down. It feels like it's a gated community that way, and I don't think that makes sense. The BR1 project, the backside is a lot of surface parking, and I know you mentioned, Alex, that a lot of that parking is by code and by requirement. But it also connects to the neighborhood. I'm not sure if there's a way we can't figure out a better use for that unused parking in the back, and maybe if the offices are so full that you need the parking, it's not a good idea, but it feels like it's just another opportunity because that starts to provide connectivity to the BR1 project and also the park that's going to be up that way. Architecture, I think we have put together great design guidelines. You did with City Walk. I think those are good. I think the work that we spent on the San Ramon Village specific plan about mixed use, I think is top notch. And it does highlight, I think, some of what we thought was important when we put that together about building designs and articulation, especially with retail underneath housing. And then my last comment is, I think, kind of a process comment on how we gather input and how we move this forward. And I mentioned this yesterday. I think this is a great opportunity, but we'll have, 20 or 25 people in the room and maybe 10 or 20 that might watch the YouTube video. But there's a lot of people that I think we can tap into for collective wisdom. And I'd like to propose that we do work with the city to put out just a survey, just like we've done on other topics, that the city has faced. And, I see a couple of parks commissioners, they've done surveys on things like dog parks and they've gotten thousands of responses. And I think they'll get a lot. I think it was get a little bit further along, design charrettes where we have tables and drawings and we break up into smaller groups. We did that with the San Ramon Village Civic Plan, and it's a good way to gather input. And I think that would work. Additional workshops like this, I think would be really helpful as the plan starts to evolve. And then when it gets farther along, I think what you did at City Walk, where you hosted a reception walk through to the community over at 2600 in the lobby, I think that worked really well. It'll be a shock to people when, Chevron gets torn down and this thing starts to come to life. So I think the more that people could at least participate slightly or lightly, as well as become informed, I think would be really helpful. I think that wraps up my comments. But I did want to go back. We had a lot of comments made tonight. See if the commissioners would like to make additional comments or new ideas, new thoughts that have popped into your head in the last 45 minutes or so.
Through the chair, if I
Yeah.
might,
Mhm.
as the commissioner speaking for another time tonight, if you could also state that you did take the tours. We've all, I think, have said 4 members to take a tour, and just who you were touring with. We were in groups of 2, no quorum, but if you could make that statement, please. I'd
I
appreciate it.
will. Happy to. Thank you, Debbie. So at the invitation of Sunset, they did give us the opportunity. And as Ms. Chamberlain said, we were in groups of 2 at most. And so 2 of us walked the perimeter with Representative of Sunset as well as city staff, just to see what the inside of the property looks like, because you can't get in there with, these days. So it was 2 walking tours of 2 each. And so we did not violate the Brown Act or the open meeting laws by doing this. And that's what we did on yesterday afternoon. Okay. So I'm going to turn around and see if any of the commissioners would like to make some additional comments or some new thoughts Commissioner Kuznick.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing from my fellow commissioners. As always, it's great to see and hear how people are thinking about this project. I have 2 thoughts. One is, actually maybe 3. So number 1 is I am developing an increasing concern in listening as we're talking about this on how we're going to balance what sounds like the desire to make this DMU South along the lines of a premier space, which is a terrific sounding word, with balancing with great density and higher levels of affordability, which most people interpret as not necessarily meshing. So, and I think there's an interesting juxtaposition of city center with this much denser, more affordable area and how that's going to resolve itself. It might actually end up being where we need to look at this entire stretch of housing opportunities from the edge of this Chevron property all the way up to the Crow Canyon Commons and say, like, well, maybe we need to look at all of this again, because this certainly really changes the dynamic of all of these individual housing opportunity sites and so forth. So I think this, in my mind, this feels like it's evolving differently than as we were looking at housing opportunity sites, the RENA numbers in this 1.5-year process to get this done. So that's that. The other thing that I want to say is, this acreage is a hopefully once in a lifetime, certainly my lifetime, opportunity. And to only think about it as office, retail, housing misses a chance. Now, I sometimes come up with some ideas that people go like, what? And I will acknowledge that. But then again, you know, sometimes you just need new ideas. So when I first heard that this property was coming up for sale, my first thought was, this would be a really great place for a school. And actually a high school. And to merge that with what is the growing trend to develop what's called middle college, which is where high school students can blend their their high school years with their beginning of their college years. It's already, you know, again, this was before I walked the property, but in my opinion, I thought Chevron probably had some pretty high-tech capacities and that classroom space could be envisioned. Now, it would not be your traditional high school because really not every school needs to have a football field. Okay, this is the 21st century. So there was that opportunity, but I was also willing to pitch the idea that if you worked with San Ramon Valley Unified and could swap out the Cal High site for housing, which makes more sense because it is in the middle of a neighborhood in which traffic is a nightmare, and put housing in housing, and you could put tech where tech is. And so I just would like to have you let that sink in for a walk around the block. I like to think on these things and have this opportunity. Does it make great sense to put a high school there? Well, I think so. You have well, first of all, you have all this housing we've not accounted for schools. It saves the west side and all these additional students at some point ending up at Cal High. The west side already has to go all the way through Bollinger over to Cal High. It's easy on and off the freeway, as we've already mentioned, accessible to Iron Horse easily. And I would also like to remind everyone that the most lucrative, at least it has been, the most lucrative retail components are those teenagers with a lot of walking around money. So who already are very frequent guests at your city center with their boba tea, Starbucks, the sandbox, and all the other kinds of things that they really enjoy. So that is a very different pitch. And I just wanted to have that opportunity to let people think that it doesn't only have to be this, that we are in fact early enough in the stages of development to maybe think a little outside of just those three boxes. And again, once in a lifetime for the city of San Ramon in this area. And I think that I'd love to see the opportunity. And again, it's a good time to rethink schools. It's a good time to rethink where we put them, where we have them, where we might need them in addition to retail. Because if in fact all of these housing units get built, there will be an impact on schools and where they go. So those were my concerns.
2.5 thoughts.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it's all big one jumble. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to clarify something. I understand that we need to build higher density housing, and I'm not opposed to that at all. I'm only talking about middle housing along the Inverness Park area as a connection. It would be outrageous on our part to say we're going to protect all the other neighborhoods by putting housing in this area. And the one neighborhood that would be affected, we're going to say, not a problem if you are. And I'm not trying to say that's what you're saying. I think maybe I was misunderstood. I think there can be a reasonably sized development of middle housing. And then I am very much in favor, as you move toward Bollinger, going with the higher density housing. And I like the idea of smaller units, to try and get to real affordability if we can, not just what the federal government says is, 20% of your income or whatever. So I think actually we're all pretty much on the same page. I also want to say that I had written down, and I don't know if I said it, but Commissioner Alpert said, if you're looking at multifamily housing and you want to get a sense of the design guidelines, that would be worth following. I think we did a very good job with the San Ramon Village plan for multifamily housing, architecturally and otherwise. I would ask you to take a look at that and just see if it doesn't fit in with what your sense of design should be and what your architect's sense of design would be. For those people who are wondering what we're talking about in terms of the big picture, I would say when you have time, Google 15-minute communities, 15-minute communities. And they talk about these kinds of concepts where you have a walkable community and that almost everything you need in your community is within a 15-minute walk of your community. You'll get some idea of what we're talking about, some of us, and a sense of the possibilities that this overall project could accomplish. I want to put a pitch in for the walking path that's here in the walking district. It's not uncommon in cities to have what are called linear parks, where it's not your traditional round or rectilinear park where various things happen within it, but it's the walk. It's the amenities and the experiences of walking that are what the whole thing is about. It's tough with the walking district that we have tried to put in place with our most recent plan, because we're dealing with multiple property owners, some of whom already have built out, and I don't know when they're going to do anything else. Others who haven't done anything with the property yet, but might. Here we have one property owner, and we're at the very beginning, and there has been a stated sense on their part that they think enhancing the trail that's there would be a good thing. I would say we should take a serious look at a different kind of public experience with a lot of different amenities, public art, a hard surface trail, and various other things, planting areas, a garden along this trail. It's a pretty good size. It could lead into, again, other open space in the area, but it could also set the stage for what we do in the walking district that we just adopted a plan for. And again, the value of it, or I should say the opportunity of it, is there's one property owner who's willing to do it as a part of an overall project. It would be a whole lot easier to accomplish. And to that end, now I'm going to get really weirdly academic. There's a book out called The Image of the City by a famous landscape architect named Kevin Lynch, who talks about how do you analyze a park. You take a look at, first of all, the edges, what's along the edges of the park. Secondly, the circulation system through and about the park. Nodes, areas where various things happen that are off of the park or a part of the park. And lastly, focal points, public art, maybe other things. Again, on a linear park like this, there's a lot of opportunity to do something that isn't soccer related or baseball related, but when you take a look at the demographics of our city and you take a look at the demographics of the Bay Area, there is a cohort, a population of which I happen to be a member, and at least one other person sitting on this podium is a member, where I used to play a lot of baseball, but that doesn't happen a whole lot now. And I tried playing soccer and got the heck beat out of me and decided that wasn't the sport for me. But taking a walk, walking the dog is something that my family does, my wife and I do. And having an interesting linear park that's more than benches, but has various experiences along it is something that we should probably explore. Again, the land's available. There's a willingness to do it. We got one property owner. I think we should explore it.
Any additional comments, thoughts? Commissioner Wallace?
I've said my piece. I am happy to have listened to my fellow commissioners' comments.
Great.
Should go for a college though down there.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards?
Thank you. Couple more things. Neighborhood serving retail. I fully agree. There have been some very interesting food-centric neighborhood serving retail developments that have gone in. The Market Hall, obviously in the Berkeley, Oakland area, has been around for a long time. There's an Alameda market as well. And then recently, there's been a new market that's opened up at Castro Valley, which is a fantastic project, which has breweries and butchers. The Oaktown Spice Shop is there. There's an olive oil vendor. There's a baker. There's a little grocery store. That's the kind of neighborhood serving retail that I think would be extraordinarily helpful to this community. It's not a big grocery store. I hear and frankly agree with some of the comments that you've made about putting a grocery store in this location. But food service businesses are very important. And I think you would have an opportunity here to site something like that next to a park. This is your placemaking. And there's an opportunity for that. I'd also like to encourage you. I heard a lot in the presentation about the fluidity of what real estate market's doing right now and how unpredictable things feel. I would encourage you to think about whether there's an opportunity to build some flexibility into the entitlements that you seek. We see that in the Bay Meadows project down in San Mateo, where they've had certain massing approved certain buildings. And right before it's time to, apply for that building permit, that's when they make the choice about whether it's going to be office or whether it's going to be something else. Pier 70 in San Francisco is another one of those projects that has some flexibility in their entitlements. And then the last thing I'll say kind of pivots off of something that Commissioner Marks was saying about the linear park concept and some of the interesting things you can do with your park space. Community gardens, where you've got the ability for residents who may not otherwise have a backyard, where they could rent a plot to have a small garden, a 10 by 10 foot area. That is a great community building exercise. And there might be some interesting demand for something like that, particularly if you're able to do some density. And I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking on one more time. Did you want to, the applicant wanted to have any final comments tonight, or we can just move on? You don't have to. It was just giving me the opportunity.
We'd just like some clarity on next steps, I think is the best thing. Ideally for us, we have the general plan coming up. Our hope is that DMU South could be filled out with a number of criteria that would establish it to be able to be included in the plan as a site, future housing opportunity site. I'm not sure which cycle. And then we could proceed to a plan where just like we did with City Walk, we can do the things you mentioned, host people and get input and develop a more specific plan for the area. It just would help us to have the certainty of the general plan to be able to go ahead with all those plans.
Fair question. I will look to the lady at the end.
Well, yeah, so we had the session with the commission tonight. I'm trying to figure out what the next steps will be still, maybe a discussion with the council next month potentially. So we still have some steps that we need to work through on how we want to do outreach. So the question of including DMU South as part of the general plan update is something for the commission to discuss tonight. It's really not on your agenda per se, but we'll be coming back once the housing is done to begin those discussions on mixed use. And as a highlight to the January 17th meeting, we'll be talking about mixed use development and the 3 districts that are being proposed. So it's, really commended the commission on, developing, if you want to proceed with adding it in, which there's some balance to, there's some thoughts to doing that only because it gives the community certainty of what may be going in that area. And so the fear of the unknown may not be there. And you've having a great robust discussion tonight as to the elements that you're anticipating. But that's, for the commission to decide how they want to proceed with that request. We certainly can craft, the vision statements around it and the policies if that's the commission's desire.
Okay, and I think for just clarity, I think our focus between now and January 31 is completing the housing element. So in all fairness, probably staff as well as the City Council Planning Commission as needed are on call for helping us complete that exercise for a lot of good reasons. And then immediately following that is when the follow-on work would take place. So this would be part of that, I think, process, potentially future workshops, potentially future discussions. I think you mentioned doing something similar to this with the City Council, which I think is a great idea, So it's not as specific next steps, but I know it's probably not going to happen much will happen between now and the end of January with the potential of a workshop similar to this with the City Council, maybe. But beyond that, I'm not sure if the schedule will even allow for much serious work at that point, unless I'm
Right. Yeah, the housing element is our priority, as the commission is well aware, and I'll be coming back to you in January.
okay. So I guess
Commissioner Alpert,
Yeah.
I would like to weigh in on this because I really would like to accommodate them. And to be very specific about this project, again, I think before we start talking about including it in the general plan, I would suggest that we need to get together and just, again, talk about alternative site plans or bubble diagram plans and just talk about what are we really talking about? What is the plan in general, not to hold you to a specific in any case, but what is it that you really want to do? Where do you want to do it? What do we assess the impacts would be to the Inverness Park area or on to city center? It's too vague right now. We've laid out some general ideas, and the burden that we've placed on you is now come up with a land use diagram or two, hopefully several, where we can understand it. You could accompany that with a short statement for each alternative on what you see as the upside, the downside, why it's market sensitive or where it isn't, whatever you think we need to know. But after we've had a much more intense chance to think about, okay, these are really what they're talking about, then we might be in a position to say, sure, put it in with this general plan. But otherwise, to wait until the end of January is to put ourselves in a box where we don't have any time, and I don't know what we're really talking about. And so it makes it tough to say yes.
that makes sense. So maybe this tonight's effort didn't take a lot of staff effort, which would detract from that. So I guess from your perspective, I think we're willing to add this to an agenda, in a future meeting and have a discussion like this or in a different room where we can, look over tables and things like that. So I'm going to change my words before. I think we're willing to meet as soon as you're willing to come back. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm looking.
Yeah, let me put in my 2.5 cents. As I understand, and Ms. Chamberlain can correct me if I'm wrong, is that right now, goal number 1 is to have our housing element certified by HCD by the end of January of 2023. In order to do that, we've got comments by HCD. We're going to have at least one meeting with the Planning Commission, a second meeting. There'll be another meeting with the City Council, all with the idea of having our housing element certified by the end of January, correct?
That is correct.
And under the rules of HCD, my understanding is that we have a year from that point to conduct the rezoning that's required to support the housing element.
That is correct. We're going to try and accomplish it in about a 6-month time frame.
Okay. All right. My view is that any rezoning of Chevron Park should be done in that time frame with the update of the general plan. I say it for two reasons, and the most important one being the one I broached to you earlier, which is that with the opportunity we have in Chevron Park to create significant number of housing units, we do have the opportunity to do something we haven't had before, which is actually to take a realistic, holistic view of development in the city, both on the residential side and on the non-residential side. That being the case, although staff is, they have a preference to do it in 6 months, which, I don't object to. But I think it's very important to have your end of the project done in that year period. And I would support Commissioner Marks and the chair about our willingness to work with you to get that done in a time frame that works for both the city and for Sunset Development. So I'm hoping that with the variety of input that you've received from us tonight, that you can go back to the drawing board and at some point in the near or intermediate future, say, we'd like to have another study session. We've thought about what you've talked about, and we have these ideas for what we'd like to do that we'd like to run by you and see what your thoughts are. And if what you're suggesting is consistent with what we seem to think would work, then you have a way you can approach it and do what you need to do in the time frame that it needs to be done, which is really 1 year from the end of January to get the rezoning done. The plans, how you want to build it, obviously that can take more time, but the key to me is we have to switch it from office to some type of residential allowing zoning. So we're here. You have our phone numbers and our emails. Field work is across the street. So we're always willing to talk to people about how they can make our city a better place. So that's my 2.5 cents.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Wallace for my statement is going to be that, the idea would be rolling this into the general plan update, and that there is time after the HE is done to have those further discussions and do that work.
That makes sense. And just to clarify, at least the next workshop would be, I'm being sensitive to staff time, of course, on the HCD and the housing element, but a workshop similar to this, I think would be a good next step to get done just as soon as possible. And as a commission, speaking at least for myself, I hate having meetings canceled. So, and I am willing to have extra meetings. So, to continue this so that as soon as we get the housing element finished, then we would be in a position to start working on the activities that will require staff input and help, the zoning changes, the general plan changes. So, okay. That work for everybody? Okay. Any other final questions, comments on this topic? If not, I want to thank you very much for spending the evening with us on this topic, because I think we're all collectively very excited about this project, as you are. And the opportunity to have a big, giant land use plan is something that at least 4 of us have never done on this dais before. So that is exciting. So why don't we move on to liaison and staff comments at this point. Has anybody attended anything of interest in the last couple of weeks? No, and neither have I. Have you? No, we had nothing. Ms. Chamberlain, coming attractions.
Coming attractions. Well, I know Chair Alpert, you hate to cancel meetings, but I'm going to cancel 2 on you because one is the week of Christmas and one is the week of New Year's. But you are more than welcome to sit on the steps of City Hall and hope people show up for a meeting for public comment for you. So we'll be canceling December 20th and January 3rd. We have no pressing items to be scheduled, and our effort, as we've been discussing, is really focused on the housing element work right now. We continue our conversations with HCD. And so you all have been informed of the special meeting on Thursday, January 12th at 7 p.m. And that meeting will include the housing element update. We are hoping that we'll have a letter from HCD. So we are working towards that goal. And then we will then have the marketplace development will be on that night also. And then on January 17th, just to round out the month for right now, we will have our SB 330 discussion. And also the mixed use discussion and the proposed project and the other question from Commissioner Wallace that he raised at your meeting back in October. So I think that pretty much rounds out our January for right now.
Great. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll fit in a discussion on Chevron at some point during January, but that's up to you all.
Probably February.
Okay. 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 If nothing else, I'll go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting at 9:25. Good night, everybody.